Hey everybody, this is Ryan McClanahan with HistoryThroughCards.com. Hope you're all doing very well today. So, when I was growing up, I surrounded myself with older generations, either family members or friends. I'd usually have a cup of coffee with World War II veterans or Korean War veterans, and there's a lot of them in my neighborhood. So, on the weekends, I'd kind of spend my time having a cup of coffee and reading the newspaper. Um, Doing things that normal teenagers usually didn't do. So, uh, usually around the dinner table, we'd all get together and we'd share stories. And my grandparents' generation, those who are still living, my grandmother was still alive when I was a kid, and up and through my early 20s. And so that generation was still around. And so I heard a lot of really great stories about their experiences as kids in the 1920s and 30s and even the 40s and 50s about what America was like for them. And it's a lot different than it was for me growing up, obviously. I didn't have the same experiences as my grandparents' generation, uh, but my generation did have a war too. Um, my grandparents both fought in World War II, and my grandfather on my mother's side did as well, and he was in a B-52. I always heard a lot of great stories about ball players growing up as well. Players that I never saw, guys like Bob Feller and Ted Williams, Joe DiMaggio, Mickey Mantle, and another guy I always heard stories about was this gentleman right here, and this is Brooks Robinson. His rookie, I picked this up um, probably 20 years ago when I was a kid, and I actually I paid. I usually don't like to say how much I pay for these things, but I paid $30 for this, and it's not in the greatest condition. It's got some rounded corners, but it still presents very nice, I think. And I uh, did bump into Brooks on a few occasions and spoke to him, and I've had some great conversations with him. And he is not just a great ball player, but he's a fantastic human being. And I always wanted to meet him, and there's a lot of ball players I always wanted to meet, and I did. I've known a lot of ball players personally and professionally, and I usually talk to these guys, not usually about sports, but just like every other things, let's just say. And so when you get them on one and away from a crowd, they'll start opening up. And I've learned a lot from guys like Bob Feller and Duke Snyder and Johnny Pesky and Bobby Dorr. They've helped me out quite a bit. A lot of those guys are no longer around. And today I wanted to tell you a little bit about my journey collecting specifically Brooks Robinson's cards because I just picked up a card that I was looking for forever. And when I mean forever, I mean forever. I've told you guys in the past that I started collecting vintage when I was about 14 years old, right when the 1994 strike happened. I stopped collecting modern cards and I went into collecting vintage. Now, some part of me thinks that I was actually starting to collect vintage before this, because I keep notes on all the cards that I collect and the exact dates and how much I spend for these cards, I pay for these cards, and sometimes where I was. I have a lot of memories. When I pick up a card, I'm not just looking at the card, obviously, and I'm not looking at the value of the card. I'm seeing this card, and it's kind of transporting me to where I was when I picked it up and who I was with, and the environment, I guess, or where it was that I picked it up, kind of transports me right back to where I picked up the card. And so it's kind of, in a way, it's kind of strange, but it's like a time machine. And I also get the same feeling or thought with movie tickets, and I keep all my movie stubs since I was a kid. And you know, the one thing about the 1980s, which I did not enjoy, was the movies. And people are like, "Wait, that's kind of strange. Like the 1980s was a great time for movies." Yeah, but when you see The Shining when you're 3 years old, or Alien, I think I might have been 2 years old, or The Fly, or Predator. This is all I saw growing up was, I guess, horror movies. I saw House, I saw Critters, and I thought this stuff was real, and it almost got me killed. In fact, I've actually written about this fact, but when I was a kid, I saw Superman for the first time, and I thought I could fly, and I I jumped out of a second story window, and I actually somehow managed to hold on to the grate, or the window itself, the ledge, and my neighbors were actually right across the street, and they saw this, and it's the only reason why I'm alive today, is because my neighbor Keith, he caught me, and scared the hell out of my dad. Let me tell you, the whole family, in fact. But not everything in the movies is real. In fact, 90% of the movies are not real, even if it says based on a true story. And it's really kind of interesting that a lot of the hobby is really based on stories and legends. I don't know how true some of these things are, and they go well past my lifetime, well beyond my life, and into Jefferson Burdick's lifetime. And I don't exactly know where the legend of this particular card comes from, but I did a another video on Brooks Robinson, and today I wanted to show you guys this, and this is actually really new to me, so I was very surprised. And when I first heard that eBay was going to do this authenticity guarantee, I was like, okay, like it's kind of gimmicky. I'm not sure which way to go on this, if it's legit or not. I just don't have any clue. I thought maybe it's kind of a dumb idea. I still think that, by the way. I don't think there's any need for it, because um, I'll show you what it is. And it says collect, trade, and repeat. Well, okay, great. And then your collection is now upgraded. Okay, I know that. I know it's upgraded. But when you flip through this stupid thing, so it looks like there's actually, it just because this is the first time for me. uh, it's there's like a magnet right here that kind of holds this everything together, and then when you flip it up like this, there's a card that says congratulations on your recent purchase, and it says this little card right here, which I think you guys probably have seen if you've ever had this happen to you. It says, "We are thrilled to deliver the latest addition to your collection. Your item has been inspected by a team of industry experts at CGC, CSG, or PSA, so you can display it with total confidence." I don't want to display this card. I don't like to really display a whole lot of cards. The cards in back of me, I actually, I'll show you what those are right now. Those cards are they're going away somewhere, and I just light is not good for cards. Just remember that. Anyway, um, and it says and because great cards deserve to be seen, this protective cover is designed to snap back into a display stand. I mean that's kind of dumb. I mean, like I just said, you don't want to have your cards in a lot of light to begin with. Some cards, a lot of collectors don't want to show people, and for obvious reasons, theft is kind of a biggie, Anyway, I do have problems with this, not the card itself, but this whole thing, because it's already graded. So it's got to go off to be inspected again. And, again, I'm always kind of like leery about grading to begin with. I can understand where certain cards should be graded, but for insurance purposes, and in order to establish a value. But again, there's now two sets of value, right? There's two standards of value, one for graded cards and one for raw cards. And I am I am pretty confident in my ability to detect forgery or fraud or some kind of trimming. So not everything is 100%, right? And I have on occasion been taken for a ride, and it happens to every collector. It's not unusual to me, even though I've been in the hobby for such a long time. I still don't know everything, and uh, it's only as good as your eyesight too, what you're viewing. So if you're at a show, you're gonna probably miss out on certain things, certain details that. Sorry, with the kids in the background there. The windows are open, and it's a really nice day. Anyway, kids will happen. Anyway, um, I'm still kind of a kid. I'm never gonna change that. Shows are notorious for bad lighting, and so you may be inspecting a card that you really haven't seen everything. And before I show you what this is, I want to just kind of show you this Brooks Robinson card again. So this card is actually probably good, very good. The problem is here is it's solid. It's a solid card. Problem here is when you're at a show and you see this like this, you may miss something. And so what I always try to do is move the card around a little bit like this, side to side and up and down. And that way I'm not going to miss anything. At least I shouldn't. I have a flashlight as well, and a black light that I use, and I'm sure it drives certain people crazy. But this card actually has a little bit of a crease. If I can show you right there, and it's still not bad. Again, I always tell you guys to buy what is there, buy what you can afford. And some cards are just either so rare or so expensive that you're going to have to pick up the card in any condition if you want that card, if you can afford that card again. So this is a card that I paid 30 bucks for when I was a kid, and in fact, I I paid more money for this card right here, the 58, than I did for his rookie. And I, as much as I like Brooks Robinson as a player and as a human being, I hate this card. I'm 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 serious. I don't like it. The photo makes Brooks look like a, you know what? He looks like a doofus. I'm trying to be nice about this, but um, it's a really bad photo of Brooks Robinson, and I paid 40 bucks for this stupid card. And I don't know anyone who likes this card. If there's any comments defending the 1958 Topps Brooks Robinson, I am all ears because I'm not a fan of this card. I bought it because it's Brooks Robinson and it's his second year. However, if he had a different photo, this card would probably be worth a lot more than it is today. And I'm not even sure how much this card is worth today. Again, going back to the 1957 here, this is a great card. It's a classic, and it's on a lot of people's want lists. It's in the high number, obviously, and there's something really kind of weird going on with the high number, the high series 57 tops, which I can't quite pin it down. There's not a whole lot of stars, if you will, not a lot of guys who eventually would go on to the Hall of Fame in the last series. You have what it looks like a lot of future Hall of Famers in the very first part of the 1957 top set. In fact, I've also heard too uh, that Topps was playing around with a special kind of card in 1957. They look exactly like the 1957 tops, but they are, well, they're kind of like the 1980s tops Tiffany, if you will. There's something different about these particular cards. People have seen them, and a lot of these cards actually came from Woody Gelman and his shop in New York City. And so Woody Gelman, he or Gelman, I can never pronounce this guy's last name correctly, but he uh, he had a shop that sold surplus Topps cards in the 1950s and 1960s through the 1970s. And this batch of 1957 Topps, they came from that shop, and people swear that these cards, these specific cards, are different from the regular 1957, and they've been dispersed throughout the collecting world, if you will, the hobby, since the 1970s. I've also heard too that there was a fire in Gelman's shop, and a lot of his cards that survived smell like smoke. And it's kind of funny because I've seen a lot of 1933 D longs that have a little bit of damage on one side of the card. It's smoke damage. I actually have one of these. The Marty McManus is the card that I have, and that's a very interesting set. I really like that set, but I've seen enough of these 1933 D longs that have a bit of smoke damage on one particular side. I don't think that's a coincidence. I can't definitively say that these cards came from uh, Gelman's shop, but wherever they came from, it's kind of strange. I'm just putting it out there that you're gonna see these. I've seen enough of them. All right, so let me show you the card. Obviously, this is kind of interesting, to tell you the truth. But it is the 1967 Topps Brooks Robinson number 600. This is actually graded by SGC, and again, the company ended up or eBay, whoever sent this off to get authenticated again after it was slabbed. Why? I don't know these things. It seems really stupid to me, but again, the 1967 Topps Brooks Robinson is a supreme rarity. There's actually a fewer of these graded by PSA than 1952 Topps Mantles. I think there's about 15 to 1600 that were graded. Nobody knows why this card is such a short print card. It really doesn't make a whole lot of sense. Um, I've only seen maybe two or three copies, as they say, out in the wild, which is I don't know where that one came from. The wild, yeah, okay. Anyway, I heard that not long ago, and I was like, well, wait a minute, that's kind of that's different. Anyway, so I've only seen two or three copies of this particular card at a show or a convention, and I've seen photos from Beckett, and this is really where I really kind of fell in love with the card, and I really wanted Brooks Robinson's rookie card as well, and it's because of the photos from Beckett magazine. Now this is actually graded a 5, so it's excellent. The bottom it's a little off center, and so it's not bad. I can't complain. Obviously, along with the Brooks Robinson rookie here, that one's obviously not in the greatest condition. But I always tell you guys to pick up what you can afford, and when it's available. And this card became available probably the first time. I paid quite a bit of money for this, more so than my usual limit. And my limit on spending on a particular card has not changed. ever, except for this particular time. And a lot of it is because of the taxes that eBay uh, charges or somebody charges. Um, and so I told you guys in a recent video about the eBay taxes and that situation. And so, I'm probably the only guy in the world that would bring that one up to a video. So I'm really curious about the standards that these companies have, and do they have to go to school for a forensic document examination? And if they do, you know, how long do they have to go through this process, and what is it exactly? Especially when it comes to autographs. And we know that that's a certain problem within the hobby, is that a lot of grading companies have graded forgeries in the past and passed them off as legitimate. It's really very concerning to me because a lot of collectors are paying a lot of good money for these cards. But um, when it comes to the Brooks Robinson here, nobody's going to forge a Brooks Robinson autograph. It's like forging Bob Feller's autograph, and you know what they say about Bob Feller's autograph. If the world were to end tomorrow, the only thing that would be around is pigeons, cockroaches, and Bob Feller's autograph, because he signed so much. And I have seen actually a lot of ball players who sign frequently. Their autograph is going for more than it actually should. Brooks still, I think he still signs. He's 86 years old, and I hope he lives to be 110. Even when he does go on to the Field of Dreams, he's still going to be one of those ball players that we all talk about for 100 years to come. He's that important, not just as a ball player, but as a an American. And same can be said about either Bob Feller or Yogi Berra or Ted Williams or a few others. Frank Gifford is another guy, and so or even Phil Rizzuto. Right, so I first learned about Phil Rizzuto from the Money Store. A lot of these guys are known through different generations, from generation to generation. Even if you didn't see them play, you still know them because they're either on TV or in advertising or some kind of product release. So the same was true for Brooks Robinson here, and he was well known as an announcer as well. So growing up, I would not have been able to afford the 1957 Topps Brooks Robinson, let alone the 1967 Topps Brooks Robinson. And both of these cards are always expensive because Brooks is a very, very popular ball player and a popular human being. And so the April 1993 edition of Beckett, which is this right here, I keep actually an entire library of Beckett's from the first one all the way up through maybe 2009, 2010. And so these are actually really great. And I'll probably start actually reading a little bit from these Beckett's more often because it's kind of a good window into the era in which the Beckett was published. And so it kind of tells me a lot about how the hobby has changed as well, and people's tastes in cards. Now, that was the 1993 April edition of Beckett, and that Robinson was going for $250 at the time. Obviously, in 1993, I was a kid. I was an early teenager, and there was no way I'd be able to grab a card for $250, let alone $50. And that was a lot of money, and it's the equivalent of $524.85 in 2023. At the time, the hourly wage in 1991 through 1994 was $4.25, which was the equivalent in 2023 of $8.92. that's still kind of relative in a way, but it's still again something that you're not going to be able to purchase if you're a 12-year-old kid or 13 or 14 or even maybe 20. So you can think of that 250 as being 550. And the other thing too is that just because the a price is in a price guide doesn't mean that that's the price that you're going to pay for that particular card. That Brooks Robinson, either the 57 or the 67, the dealer could easily jack up the price of that card as well. So the card itself could be listed at say 250, but the dealer has to have more room because he's got overhead. And now that card he's asking say $700 or $500 for that card. Being in the hobby for as long as I have seen a lot of changes in the hobby, and mostly technology wise. eBay, for example, is probably one of the best ways, I think, uh, to extend your collection to grab cards. Where when I was growing up in my day, the only thing that we had was card shops, and card shops are really they've kind of gone the way of the dodo, if you will, because of eBay. And what eBay has done, I think, has been both positive and negative. And one of the positive things eBay has done uh, is that you now have a greater opportunity to add to your collection than ever before, because you're not just, uh, I guess, localized to a specific area and dependent on your card store to get you the cards that you want. That's great if you're into modern, but if you're into vintage and the only thing that you have is a card shop, then good luck, because I can remember the rare times that my local card shop had vintage cards. It was kind of far and few between. So, like the first time I saw vintage was a third grade trip to the card store to learn about math and problem solving skills. And thank you, Mrs. Kelly. I really appreciate that. I mean, that kind of set me off to a different path, one that I wasn't really expecting. In the third grade, the only thing I wanted to do was be like Indiana Jones, but again, there's no Nazis, and really kind of shifting through dirt to find buried treasure. Man, that's that's long, arduous, and it sucks, and you don't get paid a lot anyway. Um, in a way, I guess what I do now is kind of like archaeology. Because again, like I've told you guys, but when I'm looking at a card like this, I'm not just looking at the ball player, or reading the stats in the back, as you guys can see right here. Very interesting. But there's a lot more to baseball cards and sports cards than what you're looking at. And so it's kind of like an onion, just peeling off layer after layer after layer. And you're getting into everything from economics to science to photography to technology, the law, art, obviously, sports, and the player, and all the intricacies that go along with those subjects. And this is really kind of like why I love to study sports cards. I, I hate to say this, I study sports cards the way scientists study bugs. And, I want to find out everything about these cards, how everything operates, the hobby, how it was put together. I think this stuff is really fascinating. The other thing I really find very fascinating about the hobby too isn't just the sports cards; it's the people you meet and the ball players. A lot of the ball players really do enjoy going to shows. Um, Unfortunately, some of their autographs really suck, and so to the sports players of today, pick it up, guys. Do a better job at autographing your cards, because this is your reputation. So that's my rant on that. But there's a lot to this stuff that I really enjoy. And then there's also the economics of sports cards. And I think that the hobby has done some really great things. One thing that it has done for me personally is I have really kind of become a better writer through the hobby. And while I'm not perfect at writing, I I always strive to be a better person, a better writer, um, just better all around. And I've met so many great people, and I really think that that's what the hobby is done successfully. Are there bad guys in the hobby? Yes. That's been around longer than I've been alive. For the most part, the hobby is actually a really decent place. You can meet a lot of great people and have a lot of great stories. So the hobby is made up of a lot of great stories over the years. I think this is the driving factor of a lot of value actually in the hobby. Uh, you can go back to the 1952 Tops, Mickey Mantle. You can go through the T206 Wagner stories. You can go through the 1933 Gaudi Nap Lajoie, and all these prices of these cards are essentially because of what we see in the background here. Now, what I'm pointing to is the auction catalogs, and I think it's really a combination of auction catalogs that have really been the catalysts for a lot of the values and stories associated with these particular cards that have kind of driven up the values. Now, for the most part, I don't think that a one-off auction price is going to catapult the rest of the cards in any given card. So, like, if you have like a 1952 Topps Mantle per se that goes for say $6 million, that doesn't mean that every single card now is worth $6 million. Obviously, um, that's not how it works, and it wasn't how it worked when Beckett was tabulating the values for these sports cards. So um, I actually don't know why this particular card it is rare. I don't think anybody does. A lot of people say it's one of the true rarities of the 1960s. It's certainly on a lot of want lists. There really is no good explanation for the rarity, except it is in a high number series. Even so, there are cards in that high number series that don't fetch or don't command the same values. Obviously, they're not Brooks Robinson. There was a really interesting article that I read uh, in my last video on this particular subject about dealers who were going from coast to coast trying to locate as many 1967 Tops Brooks Robinsons as they could. And their story is really interesting. It's actually more in tune to what a lot of other people have said over the years as well, that the card is just extremely, extremely rare. I'm not really into the value of a lot of my collection. That's not why I collect. Collecting for me is probably a little bit different than for somebody else. I'm looking at it from different angles here. So I'd also like to know too if you guys think that this is actually a good idea or not, what the pros and the cons are, if you will, to this particular holder. I don't see that it makes a whole lot of sense, to tell you the truth. I think it's a dumb idea, and it could be that it's probably eBay's way of limiting a liability on themselves. But again, I'd like to hear what you guys have to say about it. It's not for me, and if I had my way, I would forget about the holder itself, and I already know the card is legit. It's already been graded. So again, going back to the grading company to have it inspected is is useless to me. Again, like you can always be taken advantage of, and there's something you may miss. As long as you talk to other dealers and you're in the hobby on a routine basis. I always say this too, that the more cards that you see, the better off you'll be as a collector or an investor. Um, and you're not going to be taken for a ride or advantage of as much as you would if you were just brand new into the hobby. This hobby really is a hobby that, again, it should be enjoyed with other people. It brings other people together, but it's also something that you need to constantly learn from. It's one thing to collect cards, but you still need to do your research and your homework. And it's just like everything else. If you were into stocks and bonds and into Wall Street, you need to pay attention to what's going on in Wall Street in order to make an investment and to not get ripped off. And the same thing is true with the hobby. I've also said too that Beckett is really, I think, the first time where we see the hobby turn into Wall Street because of Beckett, and Wall Street is not the hobby, or the hobby is not Wall Street. So it is fun. I enjoy it quite a bit. I enjoy meeting new people and hearing what they have to say. And so, guys, thank you so much for stopping by. I greatly appreciate it as always. I always love to hear what you guys have to say about cards, and I learn from you guys too. Again, I may be in the hobby for a very long time, but that doesn't mean that I know everything about the hobby or specific cards. If I knew everything about the hobby or everything, that would be very boring. That'd be a boring life. One of the things I think that we're here on this earth is to learn. And so, with that, guys, thank you so much. I just greatly appreciate it as always, and I will talk to you later. Bye.